Before we begin, I would like to say that the links to the stories will be in the description below if you want to read along with me. With that being said, let's begin. Number 1. So, there was this one park with a lake in the city I grew up in. It had a nickname, Stalker Lake. This was before cell phones were common. I was young then, only a freshman in high school, and our track team went with the coach's instruction to meet for a run around the path that circled the lake. It is about a mile in circumference, and I'm going to tell you right now, I was not the best runner on the team. In fact, I was the slowest, saddest girl on the track team. The coach warned us of the lake's reputation, even calling it Stalker Lake, and told us to buddy up. I had no buddy, and he did not enforce buddies, so soon I was left on my own after the runners took off. I ran. I tried my best. We were doing 3 loops, and I saw people for the first loop, then was passed by people on the second loop. Then, by the 3rd loop, my sides were aching, and everyone on the team had lapped me and was gone. I was at the half-mile point, as far as you can get from the main road. The rest of the area on the far side of the loop around the lake led into Moore Park, which included dense tree growth, brush, bushes, and just generally useless territory. You couldn't see into it well, and you couldn't see past it, and there was not a way to run through it safely. I got a stitch in my side, so I stopped and started to walk. I pressed my hand into my side and must have been visibly tired because of what happened next. I heard a rustle behind me. It was loud. Someone was coming out of the bushes. I started walking faster. Something in me told me not to look. I knew if I looked, it was over. I just knew. I sped up my walking. They did too. Not more than a couple yards behind me. My heart was beating hard now. I started to run. They started to run. I ran faster. They ran faster. I could hear the footsteps right behind me, pounding into the pavement, almost catching up to me. Each time they would pull closer to me, I found the strength to push faster. My adrenaline pulled me forward. I ran. I went into an all-out sprint, and maintained it with this person on my heels for the remainder of the loop. I knew if I could just make it to the street, if I could get back near people, I would be okay. I had to. I ran. I heard their breathing. They were that close to me. I didn't look. I knew if I saw his face, and I was sure it was a man from the sound of his breathing, that he would have to catch me because I could identify him. So I didn't look back. I just looked forward and ran. I reached the entrance to the path and heard a wheeze behind me. I dug my heels in and pushed myself forward. I heard another wheeze, and then another. His footsteps stopped, and he gasped for air. I ran, letting the wheezing fall into the distance. I ran from there, all the way back to my school without looking back. When I reached it, no one from the team was there. No one had waited for me. I got my stuff from my locker and walked home, shaking and terrified and grateful. At the time, I lived with my grandmother. I think I would have reported it if I had been living with one of my parents, but I didn't want to scare her, so I kept quiet. I wish I hadn't now. Now, I know the importance of reporting these things, to prevent further incidents. To this day, that lake has a reputation, and nothing has been done about it. I feel very lucky for getting away. Lucky that I was fast enough, that the man was slow enough, that I knew to run and not look back. It occurred to me years later that this person was not only attempting to kidnap me, but that he was attempting to kidnap a child. I looked like a child. I did not look mature for my age, and was a young teen at the time. Now, I carry my cell and pepper spray, no matter how crazy it makes me look. I also never run on paths. People look for targets on bike and running paths. I prefer to stick to nice crowded streets, no matter how gross other people think my sweaty running self is. I recommend the same for everyone else. Also, shame on my coach. Jeez Louise. Don't tell your girls' team to run at Stalker Lake. Please stay safe, everyone. And to the pedophile kidnapper, let's not meet. I hope that was an asthma attack and it got you, honestly. Number 2. First time poster, so go easy on me. This incident happened to me earlier this year, and I've only told a couple of close friends since then. I should mention I had my glasses on at the time, and they're weaker than my contacts, so if I wasn't focused, I had trouble seeing. In January, I was still living with my mom. I was at the end of a rough time in my life, and would often go on hikes to get out of the house and get some alone time. I would usually use this time to calm down and think to myself. The town I live in is a college town, but pretty safe. Nothing more than a couple of thefts here and there. So naturally, I felt pretty safe in the woods and had been hiking alone since I was young. Anyways, I went to a state park that can get pretty populated at times. But since I was there in the morning, there was only one other car in the lot. I walked up a trail that encompasses a very large lake. Eventually, I found a small gravel clearing with a bench, sat down, and lit up a bowl. A couple of hits in, I got a sinking feeling in my stomach. The feeling you get when you're not alone. Fearing being caught with weed by someone else on the trail, I casually peeked behind me to see if someone was there. A middle-aged man was on a trail that looked over the lot I was in. Not wanting to look suspicious, and I was more afraid of getting caught, I stayed sitting on the bench and waited for him to continue on his way. But he was walking slow. He was shuffling his feet and even walking backwards. His hands were in his pockets and he was fiddling with what I thought was his phone. Basically, he was walking in place. I waited for the man to yell down to me, but he never made a sound. At this point, I figured I should just leave, so I started to walk on my trail back to my car. The trail he was on went the same way, but was maybe 4 feet higher and a couple of feet away. The man started to follow me. He followed me the whole trail back to my car. Not wanting to escalate anything, I walked fast, but I made sure I didn't run. I was honestly still afraid of getting caught. When I got to the end of my trail, his trail still continued on, but looked down on where my car was. He stopped so he was facing the passenger side of my car. He was still maybe only 7 feet away. As I fumbled to get into my car, I kept my eye on him. My hands were shaking, and he was still playing with his phone. When I finally got the key into the door, I looked up at the man, and we finally made eye contact. His eyes tore into me. He was so focused on me that I instantly felt shocked. That was the only time we looked each other in the eyes. I could see his hands moving, and I focused to see what he was doing. His pants were unzipped, and he was furiously masturbating, staring me right in the eye, and slowly going off the trail to my car. I jumped in my car and started it up, crouched down to look through the window to see where he was. I sped the fuck out of the lot, looking back the whole time in horror. He was still masturbating. He was throwing his head back in ecstasy, and that was the last look I got at him. I was so sickened that I didn't know what to do. To think he was just steps behind me the whole time, most likely getting off at literally preying on me like a fucking hunter. I will never forget how he pretended to walk on the trail. Who knows how long he watched me sit on the bench. I hope I never meet that man again. Number 3. So, after lurking for a while, I've decided to go ahead and post about something that happened to me around May of 2011. For some background information, I was born and raised in Alaska, Anchorage specifically, and I decided to start my undergrad studies in a small college town in Montana. Anyway, due to many financial pitfalls, my family and I decided that me moving back home and going to school locally would be our best bet. So the academic year wrapped up, and my mom flew down to meet me for a road trip through Canada before re-entering the US on the Alaskan side. Of course, because I had intended on living in Montana for 4 years, there was a lot of junk in my car weighing it down, so I wasn't keen on speeding through unfamiliar roadways. The first day or so was great. My mom and I stopped here and there to do some shopping in a few larger Canadian cities. Overall, we made a point of traveling mostly during daylight hours, but during the early morning and evenings, I usually drove. My mom had eye surgery a year or so before all of this, so her eyesight tends not to be so great at night. So on the third night, I'm driving us to a hotel in Dawson, Yukon, Canada, and things are going fine. But we are a bit behind schedule, and it's getting dark faster than I would have liked. Somewhere after Stewart Crossing, we end up with this absolute asshole tailgating us with his high beams on. I'm kind of annoyed because I was already going nearly 10 kilometers over the speed limit, so I move to the side and wait for the guy to go around me. I would like to point out that this was a single-lane, two-way road with nearly no traffic. Despite me getting out of the way and waiting for this dickhead to go around, he seems to mimic my movements, staying right behind me even as I move almost off the road. By now, I begin feeling this heavy, cold feeling in the pit of my gut, and my mom begins panicking. As I've said before, the woman's blind as a bat in the dark, and I was having a fairly hard time making out anything in my mirrors with dumb fuck's high beams blinding me. Unfortunately, I couldn't get a make or model of the vehicle, let alone a license plate number or anything about the driver. This all continued on for a while. I dropped down to the speed limit, sort of putting my foot down and saying, if fuckface wants to speed, he, it could have very well been a woman for all I know, can go around. Still, the tailgating and high beaming continued, even as other people passed and flashed their high beams at the jizz rag. We were maybe 10 or so kilometers outside of Arlington when things escalated. As we were getting closer to civilization, Arlington at least, my mom told me to just speed up and lose them. The driver suddenly sped up, as if sensing I was now actively fleeing, and attempted to ram us from the rear driver's side. It may have been sheer luck that they missed, or that I accelerated faster than them. As all this was happening, my mom was attempting to get a call through to emergency services, only neither of our phones had a signal. We have a local carrier, and even in Montana, the service was terrible. By now, I'm easily breaking the speed limit by at least 20 kilometers an hour, when the engine behind me revs up and the vehicle, a large SUV I realize, zips around us and suddenly slams the brake with their vehicle diagonal to us. I slammed my brakes in response and nearly lost control as I drove almost entirely off the road. In the passenger seat, my mom is screaming hysterically, but I barely noticed at the time. In front of me, I can make out several figures in the SUV, only I wasn't terribly focused on much. All I remember was practically seeing red before shifting into reverse and hitting the gas pedal, before shifting back into drive and speeding forward. I narrowly missed the back end of the SUV in the escape. After that, I wasn't entirely sure what happened. I was speeding off, and the vehicle was still following, but further back. As we pulled into Arlington, they disappeared into some side street, and my mom and I debated going to the police. We stopped at the first place with lights on, a hotel, and my mom ran in to use the phone. I waited in the car, trembling from the rush, and anxious in case that SUV was still prowling around. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe just some asshole teenagers who don't understand driver etiquette or how to drive around someone. Maybe it was some dickish prank. I considered it might have been insurance related, but they seemed more interested in forcing me off the road than making me hit them. In the end, nothing was, or could be, done by the local police. So my mom and I hurried along to Dawson, alone and slightly paranoid. When we got back, we agreed not to share this story with my dad, because he was already controlling and paranoid enough as it is. I suppose his paranoia is not without reason, since if things had gone differently, I might not be here to share the story with you all. Thank you for reading. I hope this wasn't too long or boring. Thanks for listening to another 3 True Scary Stories from Reddit. Remember, if you like this video, make sure to leave a thumbs up, and also subscribe for future content. Until next time, everybody, have a great day, and as always, stay safe.